Hi, this is Joe from Mapamundi, and in today's video we're going to continue discussing the differences between Spanish and Portuguese grammar. Now this is the third video that I've made in this series, and as I've said before, I'm discussing Spanish in Latin America, and I'm discussing the Portuguese that's used in Brazil. So I know that there are some other varieties. There are a lot of different varieties of Spanish, and there are a lot of different varieties of Portuguese, even in Latin America and even in Brazil. But what I'm going to be discussing here is considered to be the standard way of speaking in Latin America and the standard way of speaking in Brazil. So in today's video, we're going to discuss two topics. One of them is a little bit more advanced and the other one is a little bit more basic. The first thing that I want to discuss is the difference between how the verbs for to be are used in Spanish and Portuguese. Now, like many other languages and like many other Romance languages, Spanish and Portuguese have two copular verbs, which means verbs that express being, to say, I am 12 years old, I am happy, she is here, okay? Those are copular verbs. They express a kind of relationship between a noun and an adjective, a noun and a location, a noun and another noun. They're different from saying things like, I see you. I see you is not a copular verb because it's not expressing what I am, it's expressing something that I'm doing. And the copular verbs in Spanish and Portuguese are extremely similar. The infinitive forms are spelled the exact same. They're pronounced slightly differently, but in Spanish it's ser and estar, and then in Portuguese I have ser and estar. So they're really pretty similar the way that they're pronounced, and they are mostly similar in the way that they function, but there are some scenarios in which they work differently. There are some situations where Spanish might use ser and Portuguese might use estar, and Portuguese might use ser and Spanish might use estar. So here are some examples of where those situations might differ. Being is a verb that's really kind of difficult to pin down. What it means to be is something that's a little bit more up for debate and philosophical than, for example, to run or to eat or to cook. Those verbs are a little bit more easy to pin down with what they mean. But the verb for being, it's something that's kind of hard to define, really. So that's why when we have these discrepancies between ser and estar in Portuguese and Spanish, it's kind of hard to say which one is, quote unquote, more correct or which one is more philosophically valid. And ultimately, it's kind of a pointless conversation because they're valid in the languages that they work in. So one example where we see oftentimes a difference between the verbs that are used are when we have past participles used as adjectives. For example, in Spanish, if I say something like, the book is made of paper, I say, el libro está hecho de papel. But if I want to say it in Portuguese, I say, o livro é feito de papel. So in the Spanish version, I'm using estar, which is the more temporary copular verb. And in Portuguese, I use é, which is the more permanent copulary verb. It's the one that comes from ser. The same thing if I say something like it's forbidden to swim. In Portuguese, I say é proibido nadar. If I say it in Spanish, I say está prohibido nadar. So they use different ones, but we can see that the inverse happens as well. So if I have a sentence like the answer is correct, in Spanish I have la respuesta es correcta, but then in Portuguese I have a resposta está correcta. So in Spanish I use ser, and in Portuguese I use estar. Another situation where we see a discrepancy between ser and estar is the location of non-moving things. In Spanish, it doesn't matter if something is moving or non-moving. I tend to use estar. The only time I might use ser with location in Spanish is when I'm talking about the location of a function, like a party or a concert or something like that. But for the most part, non-moving things in Spanish, they still take estar. So if I say something like the house is near in Spanish, I say la casa está cerca. And if I want to say the house is near in Portuguese, I can say a casa é perto. I think you can probably also hear people saying a casa está perto, but I think a casa é perto is probably more common. And with these kinds of like buildings and non-moving structures in Portuguese, you oftentimes hear people using ser instead of estar. And obviously these are only 3 examples, so it's not an exhaustive list by any means, but I just wanted to give you some examples of how they might differ and in what scenarios that might happen. And this discrepancy between the permanent copular verb and the non-permanent copular verb, it's something we can see in Italian as well, where the tendency to use essere, which is the version of ser, it's a lot more common to use essere for a lot of things that Spanish and Portuguese use estar for. For example, to say I'm happy in Italian, you would say sono felice. You don't use sto felice. And sto is really only used in certain situations where I have to stay, or if I have something like I'm well, sto bene, sto male, I'm not well. It's also used in a lot of fixed expressions. And French only has one copular verb, it only has être, but that's because in Old French it did have two copular verbs, but because they became so similar in sound due to the way that the French sound system evolved, they merged into the same verb, so now French only has one verb to be, used in permanent and non-permanent situations. And so this discrepancy between the permanent and non-permanent copular verbs is something that we see across languages because, as I said before, being is something that's a little bit hard to pin down on a philosophical level. So I hope this video was interesting, and to see more videos just like this where I discuss linguistics topics, be sure to subscribe to my channel Mappa Mundi Languages to see new material coming out every Friday.